Hey, G-Sippers. Hey, 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 hey. Okay, so this time the notification went out. I don't know what's going on with this one. Hey, so listen, let's just pick up where we kind of left off. It's just so much going on. It's just like, oh my goodness. And the officer Jonathan Ross, he has a GoFundMe. After seeing all the media BS about domestic terrorists getting a GoFundMe, I feel that the officer that was 1,000. Oh, so this is probably somebody else collecting this money for him. Oh, wow. Well, somebody set up a GoFundMe for that officer that unalived Renee Good, was asking for 550K, little over half a mil. And they already have 94% of that. They have 514. Ain't that a dang shame? That is so messed up. What do he need that for? When will it end? So let's listen to the voice of the voice of her. I'm not saying it's her. I'm saying it's the voice of her. We're listening to the message, not to see if it is AI or not. We are listening to the message. So maybe I need to move it to the side so no one will come on saying, oh, that's AI. You do know that's AI. Like, is the message true? That's all we concerned about. Let's go.
Hi, it's Kamala Harris. Something unusual is unfolding in Washington right now, and it isn't coming from across the aisle. It's coming from inside the president's own party, and that matters. Because for the first time in a long while, the resistance isn't loud or theatrical. It's quiet, it's procedural, and it's aimed directly at the power the president is trying to hold on to at all costs.
Trying to
What
hold
you're
on to
seeing
it.
collide in real time are emergency declarations, war level language, and a kind of internal panic that doesn't usually surface this way. Congress is stepping in, not for show, but to draw a boundary. And this isn't just another political skirmish or a fleeting headline. It's a test. A test of whether power in this country is ultimately governed by law or by one man's instincts when he feels cornered. Picture
Because he
Washington
doing a
late at
lot.
night, phones lighting up across Capitol Hill, staffers leaning in, voices low, senators checking the same messages twice because they don't quite believe what they're reading. The president is furious, not at Democrats, not at the press, but at his own party. And that's the shift, because the pressure isn't coming from outside the walls anymore. It's coming from within. And that's always where things get dangerous. Right now, Republicans are pushing back against Donald Trump.
Push him back.
And no, this isn't the familiar noise of internal feuds or anonymous
They
what they're
push him
reading.
back.
The president is furious, not at Democrats, not at the press, but at his own party. And that's the shift, because the pressure isn't coming from outside the walls anymore. It's coming from within. And that's always where things get dangerous. Right now, Republicans are pushing back against Donald Trump. And no, this isn't the familiar noise of internal feuds or anonymous whispers meant to spook donors. This is colder than that, more deliberate, because it cuts into the one thing he has always treated as non-negotiable, unchecked authority. What makes this moment different isn't just disappointment over broken promises, whether that's talk of no new wars, the strain of rising costs, or disclosures that were promised loudly and then quietly delayed. The deeper shift is that Republican lawmakers themselves are beginning to move against the very powers the president is desperate to preserve. And when that happens, when the internal guardrails start to engage, presidents don't usually slow down. They escalate, they dramatize, they reach for the language of crisis. That's what we're watching now. A presidency leaning into spectacle to protect itself from internal fracture. Because beneath all of this is a reality that even seasoned figures in Washington seem hesitant to say out loud. The president has publicly entertained the idea of using military force in ways that could pull the United States into conflict, not with a
Absolutely.
distant adversary, but with its own allies. When Senator Chris Murphy
On
laid that out
purpose.
plainly, it hit hard, because once you strip away the branding and bravado, what's left sounds unbelievable only if you pretend we're still allowed to laugh these statements off. Greenland isn't an abstract concept, it's part of Denmark. Denmark is a NATO ally, and NATO rests on collective defense. That means any military action there isn't symbolic. It's a legal and strategic nightmare that, in theory, places the United States in conflict with Europe. The fact that lawmakers are now having to explain this seriously to the public tells you how distorted the conversation has become. No one voted for a presidency that risks a shooting war with allies over acquisition rhetoric. And yet, here we are, parsing hypotheticals, weighing statements, and watching members of the president's own party quietly try to close doors before they're forced open. To understand the backlash, you have to understand the worldview driving it. The president doesn't process geopolitics as alliances or shared obligations. He processes it like property, like leverage, like a deal that can be forced if you apply enough pressure. That approach might work in a boardroom. In global politics, it gets people hurt. And Republican senators know that. They know that once a president frames military action as an option, the machinery starts moving whether Congress approves or not. That's why the War Powers Act suddenly matters again, not as an abstract debate, but as an emergency brake. And when that brake was pulled, when Republicans joined Democrats to advance a resolution limiting unilateral action,
When
the
they
response
joined
wasn't calm
together.
negotiation. It was rage,
Hey,
profanity,
Thea.
threats. Because that's what happens when someone who believes power is personal realizes it's actually conditional. The reported phone call to Senator Susan Collins wasn't just about a vote. It was about the shock of discovering that loyalty has limits, that even inside your own party, there are lines you can't cross without resistance. And for this president, that resistance feels existential. His strategy depends on projecting inevitability, dominance, control. Nothing undermines that faster than your own side saying no, especially when the stakes involve war, authority, and constitutional boundaries. This is where the story accelerates. Because when faced with pushback, he doesn't retreat. He reframes. He reaches for emergency language, declaring extraordinary measures not just as policy tools, but as political weapons. And the national emergency tied to Venezuelan oil assets fits that pattern neatly. It allows him to cast himself as the sole guardian of national security while painting dissent as obstruction. The reality underneath is far messier. Long timelines, massive corporate interests, uncertain infrastructure, benefits that would largely flow upward, not outward. But complexity has never been the point. The point is dominance, distraction, control of the narrative. Emergencies change the rules. They centralize authority. They pull attention away from questions that are harder to answer. And right now, there are few questions more uncomfortable than why promised transparency has stalled, why document releases keep slipping, and why it took bipartisan pressure
Release
rather
the
than
Epstein
executive
files.
initiative to move certain oversight efforts forward. when lawmakers start talking openly about Inspector General compliance failures and missed timelines, it
Release
isn't
the
an
Epstein
accusation.
files.
It's concern that the process itself
He's
is
a
breaking down.
PDFer.
And concern is dangerous for a
He's a
presidency
liar.
that survives on momentum.
Let's be clear.
Because survival here
Let's be
depends.
clear. Sick people would rather a liar, a thief, and a child molester be in office than a female. Yeah, John Stevens, you like the child molesters. You sick. Now get out of here. You like child people to play with kids. Are you one of those type of people too? Get out. You a hater.
Not just on winning arguments, but on exhausting the public, flooding the zone, and keeping every controversy competing for
Release
attention.
the Epstein
That's why
files.
these threads aren't separate stories. The Republican revolt, the war powers fight, the emergency declarations, the stalled disclosures, they're the same story, viewed from different angles. A presidency trying to outrun accountability by accelerating chaos. And inside the party, something has shifted. Lawmakers who once waved everything through
Cynthia.
are now weighing the cost of silence.
Hey, Janet.
They're calculating institutional damage against party loyalty. They're
Trumpstein files.
realizing that if they don't act now, they may not recognize the system later. Because once a president openly suggests he is guided only by personal judgment, not law or treaty or precedent, the question stops being partisan. It becomes structural. That's the moment we're in. Behind closed doors, Republicans are asking themselves whether stopping the president is betrayal or preservation. History doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who stepped in when the rules bent too far. And this revolt, quiet in some places, explosive in others, may be the first real sign that the internal guardrails are finally being tested, not by the opposition, but by those who understand exactly how dangerous unchecked power can become. And as this internal resistance deepens, the center of gravity shifts. The real story moves away from what the president is saying publicly and toward what Republicans are doing privately. Because behind the cameras, behind the social media outrage and carefully worded statements, there's a growing recognition that this isn't a conventional presidency they're dealing with anymore. It's a leader who treats every institutional limit as a personal affront. That realization is changing behavior in ways that would have been unthinkable not
I think
that
every
long
last
ago.
one of those
When the
elections
War Powers
was rigged.
resolution advanced with Republican votes, it wasn't
I
accidental.
think he stole them.
It wasn't a lapse
Just like
in
he's stealing
discipline.
now.
It was calculated. Senators understood that once unilateral military threats toward Allied territory are normalized, Congress becomes irrelevant unless it reasserts itself. That fear isn't ideological, it's constitutional. The War Powers Act exists for moments like this. Moments when a president's instincts run ahead of the system designed to restrain them, and the response that followed, the profanity, the intimidation, the threats of political retaliation, only reinforced the concern that decision-making is being driven less by strategy and more by impulse, grievance, and a fixation on legacy. Legacy is an important word here, because the obsession with being remembered as dominant, transformative, historically consequential is colliding with a harder reality. Promises haven't produced stability. Rhetoric hasn't translated into restraint. And when the idea of no new wars collapses under the weight of aggressive military language, even loyal supporters start to hesitate. Wars aren't abstractions to voters. They're costs, they're risks, they're consequences. Republicans facing re-election understand that no amount of branding can sell a conflict with allies as a win. That's why the turn toward emergency powers feels less like leadership and more like panic. Emergencies allow debate to be bypassed. They marginalize dissent. They recast opposition as sabotage. That tactic has a long history, not just here, but everywhere leaders feel authority slipping and reach for extraordinary measures to freeze the moment in their favor. The Venezuelan oil emergency follows that script closely. Economic assets are framed as urgent security imperatives, even when the benefits are distant, uncertain, and largely corporate. The language isn't about feasibility. It's about optics, control, narrative dominance. And while the administration insists this is about protecting national interests, lawmakers on both sides see something else.
You spinning? Mm, yeah, you still spinning? Can you hear me? Okay. Go out and come back in.
Distraction, a way to pull attention away from oversight, internal party dissent, and unanswered questions about follow through. This is where the relationship between the president and his party grows openly adversarial. He doesn't just want support, he demands submission. When senators assert independence, it's treated as betrayal rather than governance. Careers are threatened publicly, even as their votes are needed privately for confirmations, legislation, and institutional cover. That contradiction exposes the fragility underneath. Power that depends on fear rather than coalition eventually turns inward. And you can see it happening now as senators quietly coordinate, compare notes, and decide where lines have to be drawn, lines that once felt impossible to draw. What's driving that calculation is a deeper unease. The rhetoric around
Look at
law,
all those charges.
morality, and authority is no longer symbolic. It's operational.
What is it called?
When a
Trump
president suggests he's
by the
governed by personal
numbers.
judgment rather than constitutional or international constraint, it signals a worldview where rules apply only when convenient. And lawmakers understand that precedent doesn't expire with one presidency. If norms collapse now, they don't magically return later. That anxiety has turned routine votes into flashpoints, phone calls into confrontations, policy disagreements into tests of institutional survival, all of it unfolding against a backdrop of public fatigue, where it's harder than ever to separate spectacle from substance. And that confusion isn't accidental, it's strategic. In a crowded information environment, chaos favors those who thrive on it. If everything is breaking news, nothing is accountability. That's why the convergence of these fights matters. War powers, emergency declarations, internal revolt, stalled disclosures. They aren't isolated controversies. They're stress fractures in a system being pushed past its design. Republicans who once justified every action as temporary or tactical are confronting a harder truth. Silence isn't neutral anymore. Inaction becomes consent. And that realization has shifted the tone from loyalty to triage. The question isn't how to help the president dominate the next news cycle. It's how to prevent damage that can't be undone after he's gone. That's why this revolt feels different. Quieter, maybe, but far more serious. It isn't driven by ideology. It's driven by alarm, by lawmakers who understand that when emergency powers become routine and war rhetoric becomes casual, the line between governance and something darker starts to blur. And once that line disappears, it rarely comes back without cost. That cost is what they're trying, maybe late, to avoid. Even as the president escalates, framing every check on his power as an attack on the nation itself, in his mind, the two are inseparable. And that belief, more than any single policy fight, is what finally pushed members of his own party into open resistance. Because while the public argument rages over war powers and emergency declarations, a quieter pressure is building underneath it all. Every time the administration escalates the language of crisis, it unintentionally exposes what it seems most eager to outrun. Oversight, documentation, timelines, the slow grind of accountability. And that's where this story turns darker, not dramatic, not conspiratorial, but procedural. Lawmakers have started asking why promised disclosures are delayed, why reviews stretch on without clear explanations, why statutory deadlines slip.
Hi, Roderick.
These aren't conclusions. They're red flags.
Bye,
And red
Roderick.
flags are destabilizing not because they prove
We know
wrongdoing,
what it.
but because
Listen
they
to the
invite
message,
scrutiny.
not
Scrutiny
the
is the one thing a
messenger.
presidency built on speed, spectacle, and dominance struggles to
If you
absorb.
have to add, if that's the only thing that you have to
delayed
say,
document releases has
bye.
become especially sensitive because transparency was elevated into a defining promise. Urgency was signaled. Prioritization was claimed. And then reality unfolded more slowly than rhetoric suggested. When senators begin pointing out that gap, focusing on numbers, compliance, and timelines rather than theories, the issue shifts. It stops being political messaging and becomes an administrative credibility test. Credibility
Hey, Max
matters.
Boogie.
It's the
Thank you,
currency of
Precious.
governance. Once it's questioned, every
Thank
explanation
you.
carries more weight, more skepticism. That's why calls for Inspector General review are so significant. They aren't accusations. They're acknowledgments that something in the process failed, whether through delay, mismanagement, or competing priorities. For an administration already facing internal resistance, that kind of inquiry compounds pressure. Inspectors General don't operate in the realm of rallies or social media. They deal in records, memos, decision chains. Their work doesn't disappear when the narrative changes,
GOP
and that's
is
where a
turning
pattern
on
becomes visible.
DON.
Whenever scrutiny tightens, the narrative widens. Emergencies are declared, external threats are emphasized. The conversation shifts away from documentation and toward dominance, from compliance to confrontation. It isn't subtle, it's reflexive.
Hi, Pamela.
Flood the zone, change the subject, raise the stakes, hope attention moves on. But Congress isn't an audience, it's a co-equal branch. And some lawmakers are beginning to act like it again. Subpoenas are discussed, financial trails are followed, questions are asked about why certain steps weren't taken earlier if transparency was truly the priority. This isn't about proving an outcome. It's about explaining a process.
Larry, who?
Processes don't respond to pressure. They don't have feelings. They have records, and records are stubborn. They
I don't know who you're
adjust
talking
tone
about.
or volume. The deeper this inquiry goes,
And you have to ask
the more it
Larry. I don't
threatens
know.
to
I don't know who
collide
you're
with a
talking
leadership
about.
style that depends on personal control over narrative rather than institutional disclosure. That collision is unsettling for a president whose authority has always rested on dominating
Did I miss a
stories.
Larry?
Because neutral review limits the ability to redefine reality on demand. Once you accept oversight, you accept uncertainty, and uncertainty is the opposite of control. This explains why loyalty rhetoric has intensified, why dissent is framed as sabotage, why even bipartisan oversight is treated as partisan warfare.
I don't see Larry.
Because accepting neutral process means accepting outcomes that can't be managed in advance. And for someone who equates control with survival, that's intolerable. This brings the discomfort inside the party into sharper focus. Republicans can see the convergence forming. War powers challenged. Emergency authority questioned. Disclosure processes scrutinized. Party
Okay,
unity
but
thinning.
who is Larry?
And they understand this isn't just a rough stretch, it's a systems test. The real risk isn't what investigators might uncover. It's what happens if oversight fails altogether. A system that can't examine itself becomes brittle.
Hey, Monty.
And brittle systems don't bend, they break. That awareness is
Brandon
changing
too.
internal conversations. Defense turns into distance, justification into insulation. Lawmakers are starting to separate their constitutional responsibilities from a presidency that treats those responsibilities as obstacles, all while the president pushes forward, portraying himself as besieged and
Like he don't see what's going on.
leaning harder into personal judgment and destiny language. But oversight doesn't rush, it accumulates. Paper trails don't vanish. Deadlines don't forget. Processes don't care about loyalty. That persistence is destabilizing precisely because it can't be shouted down. This is why this moment feels heavier than earlier controversies. It isn't about what's being said, it's about what can't be controlled. And for a leader who has always relied on narrative dominance, that quiet resistance may be the most threatening force yet. And that pressure is reshaping how this presidency is being understood, even by those who once defended it reflexively. Because the focus is no longer on any single vote, phone call, or emergency declaration. It's on whether the institutions themselves are still allowed to function when the strain comes from the very top. What's emerging is less a dramatic confrontation
Good day.
and more a slow reckoning.
Thanks for
One
asking.
where lawmakers across ideological differences are recognizing that the problem isn't just disagreement, it's durability. Whether the system can still absorb
Trump
pressure
was
without
playing
being
everybody
permanently
against each
deformed.
other.
And that
Every country
realization
against each
changes
other.
incentives. Applause matters less. Longevity matters more. Inside the party, the calculus has shifted. The question used to be how to protect the president from political damage. Now it's how to protect the institutions from being hollowed out. Because once oversight collapses, it doesn't selectively come back. It weakens everything that follows.
Yeah. He tried to play everybody. Now it's turning against him. Hold on. He leaves no choice but for people to turn against him. Even his own. He's out of control. And at this point, he gonna take you down with him. And they talking about Ricos for president. Oh, this was funny. Lord. Can y'all see it? Y'all may not be able to see it. He a monkey. a whole monkey. Monkey see, monkey do. Eating. Feeding his face. Y'all may not be able to see it. Hold on. Let me get to it because it's a lot. Minnesota is suing them. Minnesota Democrats drop bad news. Let's see what this one is talking about. Let's go.
And,
I'm joined now by the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota and current candidate for the U.S. Senate in Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first and foremost, given what's taken place
Now,
in your
yes,
state in
Rico.
Minneapolis just a few days ago, there has
Organized
been
crime.
news surrounding
You missed the earlier one.
the conflict taking place between the feds and state investigators, where it doesn't look like the Trump administration and the DOJ are interested in allowing state investigators to be a part of this process, which is especially concerning given the fact that we've already basically seen the ICE agent that was involved in this shooting get pre-cleared by Trump, by Vance, by Kristi Noem, you name it.
And
so,
he has
what
a
can you tell us with regard
GoFundMe,
to
y'all. A GoFundMe is set up for him, Ross, at $550K. And they have raised 94% of that, 514. And I'm like, for what? What are we doing? What does he need 550K for? That a suit has just. This is crazy.
any news about state investigators being able to conduct their own investigation, what most of us would believe would be an actual fair and impartial investigation?
Totally. Well, first of all, I think it's
I'm sorry.
important. I know that your viewers can see right what happened in the video of the killing of Renee Good from multiple angles, and so I think hearing the spin from Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and JD Vance, who are trying to just somehow disparage the memory of Renee Good and prejudge this entire situation is outrageous. Initially the FBI said that they were going to work with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and that's fairly standard procedure when there are incidents like the one that occurred. Shortly thereafter, they said no, they were going to cut out the Minnesota BCA, and now we are in a position where Minnesota state officials are not a part of this investigation at all, and it is completely outrageous. Minnesota state officials need to be engaged in, this investigation. It needs to be full, fair, transparent. It is what the family of Renee Good deserves. I think it's what Minnesotans deserve, and it's what the entire country deserves, frankly. Minnesota State Attorney General and Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty are investigating. They have asked Minnesotans if they have any evidence or eyewitness accounts, videos that they share that information via a portal, because right now the FBI is not working with the Minnesota BCA or state officials or local officials at all, and so they're prohibited from seeing any of that evidence. And so my question really is, what do they have to hide? And when we have folks like J.D. Vance, who from this podium say that ICE agents have absolute immunity, quote, absolute immunity, unquote, that's terrifying. It's false. And
they can do whatever they want
outrageous.
The turmoil and implosion at the Department of Justice continues, with reporting that Pam Bondi may be on the way out as Attorney General, having lost the confidence of Donald Trump, which would explain her disappearance from a number of...
Hold on. This one.
Seems like every moment is breaking news in the Trump administration and all of its scandals. And now we've got Senator Mark Kelly filing a new lawsuit against Pete Hegseth for his threats, his censure letter against Senator Kelly, threatening to take... Seems like every moment is breaking news in the Trump administration and all of its scandals. And now we've got Senator Mark Kelly filing a new lawsuit against Pete Hegseth for his threats, his censure letter against Senator Kelly, threatening to take away his rank, his service rank, threatening to court-martial him and take away his...
Why would you sue him?
Seth, for his threats, his censure letter against Senator Kelly, threatening to take away his rank, his service rank, threatening to court-martial him and take away his pension because he had the audacity to stand up as a member of Congress against an out-of-control presidency, especially a senator who spent 25 years in the military, who is covered from head to toe with commendations and ribbons and medals for his service, for his more than 39 combat missions as a naval aviator, his more than 4 space shuttle missions, including as the commander of the last flying of the Endeavor, and somebody who is on, and this is the major focus here, who is on 2 major committees as the ranking member, who is trying to provide oversight and rein in Donald Trump, the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee. And what we're watching is Donald Trump doing lawless things, blowing people out of the water in the Caribbean without due process, invading Venezuela without appropriate congressional authority, a saber rattling to try to go after Iran.
We just attacked somebody.
The deployment illegal.
Says breaking news: U.S. attacked boat with an aircraft that looked like a civilian plane. Hold on. This is crazy. All you have to do is release the Epstein files. That's all you have to do. And all this other mess that you're doing, you would not have to do this. This is cray-cray. And I'm like Eric Bonet, why haven't y'all stopped this
For a little
foolishness?
savings, Specialist Miller buys in bulk. For a lot of savings, she bundles her home and auto insurance.
Hold on. Uh, uh, let me see if this been brought up.
The Trump
I may have gotten it too quick. I saw a missile earlier go off on another page. Hold on. And I didn't know if it was a test run. Hey, Samantha. Hold on. Breaking news. President announced any country that continues doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will be hit with a 25% tax. I thought the judge told him that he didn't have the right to administer tariffs. And he's still threatening people with tariffs. Why? Trump says civil rights led to white people being very badly treated. Can y'all believe this clown? He says civil rights. So, equality is the reason. When have they been treated very, very badly? Can somebody answer this for me? Trump says civil rights. Why am I not able to see Larry? Y'all, let's hold on. I don't do well with not being able to see people. Because that means that, hold on. Okay, so now I see a Larry at 6:04. But what Larry was in here earlier that I haven't been able to see, and why am I not able to see him? There's some kooky ooky stuff going on. It is doing what it wants. Yeah, because I couldn't see it. But I am having issues. That's why I was removing those sticks. Because I don't know what's going on. And people talking about this and talking about that with those issues yesterday. Okay, I'm going to move on. But, Minnesota and Illinois sues Trump administration over ICE deployment. It is a lot going on. You can't get past one thing without another one. It is as if he is just absolutely. Minnesota strikes back. I see that one. Instant order.
At exactly 3:17 p.m. Eastern Time today, January 10th, at exactly 3:17 p.m. Eastern Time today, January 10th, 2026, a federal judge did something that has never happened in the 249-year history of the United States. Judge Tanya Chutkin formally referred criminal conduct by a former president directly to Congress and demanded immediate impeachment proceedings. Let me say that again so it lands properly. A sitting federal judge looked at the evidence in front of her 14 documented violations of court orders, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and concluded that Congress could no longer wait. This isn't speculation. This isn't anonymous sourcing. This is a 47-page legal document filed in federal court, available to the public right now. And in approximately 72 hours, the House of Representatives will vote on whether Donald Trump becomes the first president in American history to be impeached 3 times. I've been covering this story for months. I warned you this was coming. I told you that judges would eventually stop tolerating the obstruction, that the machinery of accountability would start moving. Today, it moved. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, what it means, and what comes next. So let's establish exactly what occurred today, because the details matter. Judge Tanya Chutkin presides over one of the federal criminal cases against Donald Trump. For months, she has been dealing with something no federal judge has ever faced at this scale, a defendant who simply refuses to follow court orders. Gag orders violated. Witnesses contacted despite explicit prohibitions. Social media attacks on prosecutors, judges, and potential jurors. Not once, not twice. 14 documented times in just 3 months. Each time, the court issued warnings, contempt citations, fines, and each time, the behavior continued. Today, Judge Chutkin stopped asking. She filed what's called a formal criminal referral. Think of it as a judge officially telling Congress, I have exhausted my options. This defendant is so dangerous to the administration of justice that you need to act now. The language in the referral is worth reading directly. Quote, the defendant's repeated violations constitute a clear and present danger to the administration of justice and demand immediate congressional intervention. Clear and present danger. That's not judicial rhetoric. That's a legal conclusion with enormous weight. And she didn't just send a summary. She sent the entire evidentiary record. 14 gag order violations, each one time-stamped, screenshotted, archived, transcripts from 7 separate contempt hearings where Trump was warned directly, phone records showing coordination with co-defendants despite court-ordered no-contact restrictions, social media posts targeting prosecutors, judges, and members of the jury pool, internal communications from Trump's own legal team acknowledging the violations, sworn declarations from former federal judges calling the conduct unprecedented, and then the most damaging piece of all recorded conversations, audio of Trump discussing plans to defy court orders with close advisors, evidence that doesn't just show behavior, it establishes intent. This is the kind of evidence that ends careers, that ends administrations, that ends political movements. And it was all handed to Congress in a single 47-page document. Now here's what makes this historically significant. This has never happened before. Not during Watergate, when Nixon was fighting subpoenas. Not during the Clinton impeachment, when obstruction was alleged. Not during the Saturday Night Massacre, when Nixon fired special prosecutors. Never has a sitting federal judge formally initiated impeachment proceedings against a president or former president. Judge Chutkin crossed a line that no judge has ever crossed because she concluded that the conduct left her no choice. And Congress was not caught off guard. To understand why Judge Chutkin took this extraordinary step, you need to understand how federal courts actually work. Judges have limited tools. When a defendant violates a court order, the judge can issue warnings, impose fines, hold them in contempt, or in extreme cases, revoke bail. But what happens when none of that works? What happens when a defendant is wealthy enough that fines don't matter, powerful enough that jail seems politically impossible, and defiant enough that warnings are ignored? That's the trap Judge Chutkan has been in for months. Each violation escalated the stakes. Each contempt citation that didn't change behavior made the court look weaker. And Trump, whether by
I agree with
instinct or
that.
strategy, kept pushing. He attacked prosecutors by name. He posted about witnesses in active criminal cases. He shared information that could influence jury pools. He coordinated with co-defendants he was legally prohibited from contacting. And when warned, he did it again and again and again. This is what systematic obstruction looks like. Not one bad decision, not one angry post. A pattern, deliberate, repeated, documented. And here's the critical point most people miss. A judge's authority depends on enforcement. If orders can be violated without consequence, they become meaningless. If one defendant can ignore the court repeatedly, the entire system weakens. Judge Chutkan understood that her continued tolerance was damaging the judiciary itself. Every unpunished violation sent a message not just to Trump, but to every defendant in every federal courtroom. Follow the rules or don't. It doesn't matter. That's why she escalated. The criminal referral isn't about politics. It's about institutional survival. It's a federal judge saying, I cannot fix this alone. The conduct is too dangerous. Congress has the power I don't have. Use it. This matters because it changes the frame entirely. Trump's defense has always been that this is political persecution, partisan prosecutors, Obama-appointed judges, deep state conspiracies. But that defense collapses when the person making the accusation is a lifetime appointed federal judge acting on documented evidence under oath. Judge Chutkan didn't leak to reporters. She didn't give interviews. She filed a formal legal document in open court, attached the evidence, and transmitted it through official channels. That's not persecution. That's procedure. And now Congress has to respond. Within hours of Judge Chutkan's referral, Congress moved faster than anyone expected. Articles of impeachment had actually been drafted months ago, sitting quietly in committee since November 2025. 8 specific charges:
Happy
obstruction of
birthday,
justice, witness tampering,
Reflections
contempt
with
of
Kimberly.
court, violation of judicial orders, abuse of power, conduct unbecoming a public official, threat to the constitutional order, and incitement. Until today, those articles
Thank you
had
for
about
the
87
Sunday.
co-sponsors, all
Birthday
Democrats.
lady.
Not enough to pass. As of this evening, that number has exploded to 231. That's a majority of the House of Representatives. That's enough votes to impeach immediately. And here's what's remarkable. The new names aren't progressive Democrats from safe blue districts. They're moderate Republicans from swing districts who had defended Trump through 2 previous impeachments. Representative
Okay, cool. Let's go
It's
ahead.
also, as you and I talked about, we can share with our audience. It's also just hitting that strike zone every day, of course, giving it up.
Senator Brady
All right, we're
Rank.
pulling our audience together. We're getting the band back together again. Don't adjust that dial. That is Adam Klasfeld of All Rise News on our 12 o'clock first breaking briefing. Boy, we have a lot to talk about. Thought I was going to have a quiet Sunday night. I was telling our audience last night, I do
So they pre-recorded this
the
last
Monday
night.
morning video to kick off Legal AF the night before, obviously. And, you try to pick something that is timely and interesting.
I don't want that. Let's go here.
There are moments in American history that force us to pause and reconsider everything we thought we knew about power, responsibility, and the rule of law. I never imagined that I would witness such a moment during my lifetime, and certainly never imagined that it would involve a sitting president. Yet here we are in 2026, And the reality is stark. Donald Trump, the man inaugurated as the 45th president in January of 2025, has faced an extraordinary legal intervention. A federal judge has halted proceedings against him in unprecedented act-hand. The consequences have shaken the foundations of the presidency itself. As a former president, I have a unique perspective on the weight of this office. I understand the scrutiny, the pressure, and the responsibility that comes with leading a nation of 330 million people. But I also know that the presidency is more than personality, more than ambition, more than spectacle. It is a trust, a moral and institutional contract between
Oh,
the
that's okay.
occupant of the Oval Office and
It's
the
your
American
birthday.
people.
It's
That
your
trust
birthday,
has been
girl.
strained to its breaking point by the actions that led to this judicial intervention. To be clear, the judge's decision to halt proceedings was not a procedural quibble or a minor technicality. It was a response to behavior that threatened the very integrity of the judicial process. The president's conduct obstruction, intimidation, refusal to comply with established norms of law was deemed serious enough to demand immediate intervention. That a sitting president could provoke such a response is nothing short of historic. Never before in American history has a president's behavior prompted a federal judge to effectively interrupt official proceedings to protect the rule of law. The implications are profound and frankly unsettling. We are witnessing a moment in which the office itself has been tested, and the test has exposed vulnerabilities that many of us had hoped were merely theoretical. The presidency relies on voluntary adherence to norms and respect for institutions. When those norms are ignored or actively subverted, the office becomes a vehicle not for governance, but for personal protection. And when personal protection eclipses public duty, the nation suffers. This is not a partisan observation. It is a constitutional one.
Thank
The
you
law
for the
is not meant
flowers.
for office holders, regardless of the ceremony that placed them in power. The Constitution does not grant immunity for misconduct, nor does it allow charisma or electoral popularity to excuse repeated violations of legal or ethical standards. In this moment, the judicial system has acted as it must, decisively, impartially, and with the authority that preserves the office for the future, even while addressing the failings of the individual. The gravity of this situation is compounded by the fact that the American public is watching in real time. Television networks, social media platforms, and news outlets carry images and reports of a sitting president subjected to constraints imposed by the judicial system. There is shock, disbelief, and in many quarters, outrage. Yet the outrage is often misdirected. The disruption is not being imposed by judges for personal or partisan reasons. It is being imposed to protect the Constitution and the continuity of governance. The interruption is meant to preserve the system, not to punish political disagreement. History will remember this moment, and it will ask difficult questions about what led us here. How did the sitting president come to behave in a manner that compelled immediate judicial action? How did the norms of governance erode to such an extent that a judge felt compelled to intervene directly? And most importantly, what does this mean for the future of the presidency and for the credibility of American institutions? As a former president, I cannot remain silent. Silence would be complicity. Leadership is not just about holding office, it is about defending the principles that make office meaningful. And in 2026, the principles of accountability, integrity, and respect for the rule of law are being tested as they have never been before. We are not witnessing a political disagreement. We are witnessing the unraveling of the expectations that safeguard the highest office in the land. The American people, and indeed the world, are seeing firsthand that no individual is above the law, no matter how loudly they proclaim their dominance or how long they have occupied power. The presidency is bigger than any man. Its authority derives not from force or bluster, but from adherence to norms, institutions, and a commitment to the public trust. Donald Trump's conduct has exposed vulnerabilities in that trust, and the judiciary's intervention has reminded us all why those vulnerabilities cannot be ignored. This is a shock to the presidency, a warning to future occupants, and a challenge to every American who believes in the rule of law. To understand why the judiciary was compelled to act in 2026, we must examine the conduct that brought us to this unprecedented moment. Donald Trump's behavior in office has long been a mixture of bravado, disruption, and a consistent disregard for the norms that sustain both governance and the rule of law. But what occurred in the lead-up to the judge halting proceedings was not mere political theater. It was a direct challenge to the integrity of our judicial system, and it demanded intervention. The specific issues that precipitated the court's decision are worth laying out carefully. First, there was obstruction. Court orders were ignored or delayed, documents were withheld, witnesses were pressured. These are not trivial matters. The legal system functions on compliance, evidence, and procedure. When the sitting president obstructs the process, the very framework of justice is threatened. Courts cannot function if one individual, no matter how powerful, treats compliance as optional. Second, there was intimidation. Officials connected to the proceedings reported direct and indirect pressure intended to influence outcomes. Threats, public denouncements, and personal attacks were used to create fear and confusion. In any other citizen, this would be considered tampering, possibly criminal.
Mm-hmm.
The extraordinary nature of the office does
And it
not
should be
excuse
tampering with
behavior
him,
that
too.
compromises the fairness and impartiality of legal proceedings. Third, there was defiance. Trump repeatedly dismissed judicial authority as partisan
Still
or legitimate.
is.
He framed rulings as attacks on his person rather than statements of law. By undermining the credibility of judges and by attacking the legal process itself, he created a situation in which ordinary legal mechanisms were insufficient. The court had to act decisively to preserve the integrity of the system and prevent further erosion of public trust. This conduct represents a broader pattern. Over the course of his presidency, Trump has demonstrated a consistent willingness to subordinate institutional norms to personal interest. Whether through obstruction, misinformation, or attacks on independent authorities, he has prioritized self-preservation over public duty. In most administrations, such behavior would be scandalous. In this case, it became existential for the office of the presidency itself. The judge's intervention was therefore
Pentagon
not arbitrary
used
or
fake
political. It was a necessary safeguard.
civilian
The legal system, faced with behavior
plane
that
in
threatened
a
its core functions,
deadly strike
exercised authority
that
to protect itself.
violated
The decision to halt proceedings
international.
temporarily was a
Fake
recognition
civilian
that
plane.
normal channels were insufficient when the highest office in the land is being used as a tool for evasion and disruption. Let us also be clear about why this matters beyond the immediate case. When a sitting president obstructs justice or intimidates
What in
officials,
the world?
the
Doomsday
message is
plane
not confined to one courtroom.
spotted at LAX.
It reverberates across the
Lord.
nation.
Doomsday plane spotted at LAX, sparking panic online. Y'all, what is this man doing? The doomsday plane. Probably not a good sign.
Citizens lose faith in fairness. Institutions lose credibility. Democracy depends on the perception and reality that rules apply to everyone equally, including the person who occupies the Oval Office. Trump's actions, left unchecked, would have undermined that principle permanently. It is worth noting that this is not about ideology. We are not debating policy differences or partisan agendas. This is about adherence to law, norms, and ethical conduct. The presidency derives authority not merely from election, but from legitimacy. Legitimacy depends on the belief that the occupant will uphold, not subvert the system. When behavior consistently erodes that legitimacy, the system itself is at risk. The legal breakdown that occurred under Trump's conduct also highlights a broader vulnerability in our institutions. No individual should ever be able to compromise a branch of government through intimidation or defiance. The judiciary's decisive action serves as both a corrective and a warning. The system Kenetan will not allow office to shield conduct. It reminds every future leader that the presidency is bound by law and constrained by principle. In reflecting on this moment, I am reminded of the fragility of norms and the ease with which power can be abused if left unchecked. Trump's conduct, culminating in judicial intervention, exposes the consequences of personal ambition unchecked by ethical responsibility. The president is not a king. He is not above accountability. And when he behaves as though he is, the republic itself becomes the collateral damage. We are therefore witnessing a moment of profound significance. The judge's action is not just a response to one man's behavior. It is a reaffirmation that the law is stronger than any personality. That principle is the bedrock of democracy and must be defended, regardless of who occupies the Oval Office. The moment the judge halted proceedings and effectively restrained President Trump from continuing his interference, the nation experienced a shock that is difficult to overstate. Never before has a sitting president faced such an immediate and forceful judicial check on his conduct. The images, the reports, the headlines, all of it carried the weight of history, signaling to Americans that the office they entrusted with enormous responsibility is not and cannot be immune to accountability. I want to emphasize this: the removal or temporary restraint was not an act of political theater. It was a legal and constitutional necessity. Courts do not act lightly, and judges do not intervene in the affairs of a sitting president without cause. The behavior that precipitated this intervention, obstruction, intimidation, and defiance threatened the very functioning of the judicial system. When ordinary avenues of compliance failed, extraordinary measures were required. That is the gravity of this moment. Washington, D.C. and the nation reacted immediately. In Congress, members were stunned, alarmed, and urgent in their response. Democratic lawmakers called for full investigation and clarification, emphasizing that the rule of law cannot be suspended to accommodate any individual, no matter how powerful. Republican leaders predictably faced a dilemma. Some expressed discomfort or attempted to rationalize the president's behavior, while others remained silent. Their reluctance only underscores the extent to which party loyalty has, over time, overridden institutional
Can't
responsibility.
rationalize
The
this
American
mess.
public, meanwhile, was divided between shock and disbelief. For some, the intervention was a long overdue assertion that no one, including the president, is above the law. For others, steeped in partisan allegiance or accustomed to deflection, it seemed like an attack, a disruption, or even an overreach. But make no mistake, this is not a matter of perception or opinion. This is a matter of legal principle and institutional preservation. The judiciary acted because the alternative, allowing continued interference, would have irreparably weakened trust in the system. Media coverage amplified the intensity of the moment. Every network, every platform, every online forum carried a version of this unprecedented story. But even as the media debated the implications, the fundamental fact remained: the rule of law had been upheld. The court had asserted authority over behavior that endangered not just the integrity of one proceeding, but the credibility of government
They need
itself.
to stop letting him
There
act
was
the
also an
fool.
international dimension. Allies and adversaries alike observed the sitting American president being restrained by judicial authority. For those who respect democratic norms, this action reinforced the idea that the United States remains a nation governed by laws, not personalities. For those who do not, it exposed vulnerabilities in leadership and the consequences of political polarization. In either case, the world was reminded that American democracy is resilient, but only if its institutions are defended. Public discourse, of course, was heated. Social media erupted with debate, misinformation, and partisanship. Supporters of Trump accused the courts of overreach. Critics celebrated a long overdue assertion of accountability. But amid the noise, one truth stands out clearly: the presidency itself cannot function if its occupant treats legal authority as optional. The office is bigger than any individual, and the court's intervention was a necessary affirmation of that principle. Congressional hearings were convened almost immediately to address the fallout. lawmakers debated whether further restraint or formal impeachment measures were required. What was unmistakable, however, was the recognition that extraordinary circumstances demand extraordinary responses.
Okay, hold on. I'm not gonna be here long, y'all. The likes are not up. I'm not gonna waste my time if you guys cannot hit the like button. Let's be clear. I'm not gonna do it. I am not going to do
In the
it.
eyes of many, the system had been tested, and the test had exposed vulnerabilities that could not be ignored. For ordinary Americans, the implications are profound. The president's
And
actions and
so
the
are the
judiciary's
likes. Double tap the face of the screen. Get the likes up.
This is something.
I gotta come back later. Hold on. An hour in. The likes are not up. Let me see where I'm going.
If we don't take Greenland, Russia or if we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland, and I am not going to let that happen.
Le Groenland, c'est la ligne rouge. Donc je considère que si ils envahissent le Groenland, s'il se passe quelque chose au Groenland, ils ne sont même plus des adversaires systémiques, ils deviennent des ennemis.
European leaders are fast losing
Did he
patience
say you
with
understand
the
me?
petulant man-child that we have leading this country. As he continues his threats to annex Greenland, saying that he will do it the hard way
Hey,
if
best
necessary. I would like to make a deal of, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
Talk about him because he spoiled my sleep, or they do. Yeah, I don't sleep very well because I'm afraid they have no respect for us, for my country, or for our country. So
Hollywood is a place where
They have no respect for their country.
as Trump refuses to take no for an answer. Is anyone fast losing patience with the petulant man-child that we have leading this country? As he continues his threats to annex Greenland, saying European leaders are fast losing patience with the petulant man-child that we have leading this country. As he continues his threats to annex Greenland, saying that he will do it the hard way if necessary. I would like to make a deal of, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
talk about him because he spoiled my sleep, or they do. Yeah, I don't sleep very well because I'm afraid they have no respect for us, for my country, or for our country. So as Trump refuses to take no for an answer. Is anyone surprised? Senior figures in the European Parliament are now pushing to freeze progress on the EU-US trade deal, explicitly citing what they have described as a, quote, changed situation created by Trump's threats towards Greenland. According to EU officials, a letter is now circulating among members of the European Parliament, urging colleagues to halt or delay the agreement ahead of a February vote, arguing that, well, it is no longer politically or strategically acceptable to deepen trade ties with a partner that is, just openly talking about invading a territory. If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will, and I'm not letting that happen. If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland, and I am not going to let that happen.
Is there any deal they can offer you? You go like,
yeah, sure, I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland. If you look at those in Greenland, it's echoed across the board. They're saying loud and clear, we are not for sale. Greenlanders are making it clear that Trump's ambitions are not shared by the very population that he's talking about liberating.
What I think is he wants the Greenlandic minerals to pay off the national debt of United States.
Yes. His debt.
That's what I think.
His debt.
People are really scared in Greenland.
All of
Yeah,
his
I've seen
debt.
quite few
Let's be
who
clear.
are concerned.
Not all of the debt in the United States.
yeah.
His debt.
Nightmare that he was coming with the ship. It was awful, that dream. So I'm scared.
What the reasons behind it, we don't get it, really.
His debt.
It's so peaceful and calm here, and he says
Peaceful and calm.
Denmark is not protecting Greenland. From what? And there's been a collaboration with the USA for many years. So it's not all of the sudden, but it's really aggressive now, and it's getting kind of annoying.
For instance, the chair of Greenland's largest labor union publicly rebuked Donald Trump's renewed talk of annexation, saying bluntly, Greenland's not for sale, and that the claims about foreign threats
so he's just
in
gonna go
Greenland's
and
waters
take
simply
over.
don't match the local experience. Greenlanders, he said, do not recognize his security claims.
And there's been a collaboration with the USA for many years. So it's not all of the sudden, but it's really aggressive now, and it's getting kind of annoying.
For instance, the chair of Greenland's largest labor union publicly rebuked Donald Trump's renewed talk of annexation, saying bluntly, Greenland's not for sale, and that the claims about foreign threats in Greenland's waters simply don't match the local experience. Greenlanders, he said, do not recognize the security claims that the US has advanced to justify its interest. And Denmark, Greenland's sovereign state and NATO ally, they are being forced to repeatedly reject Trump's overtures, insisting that Greenland, of course, is not for sale, and that as a result of these continued attempts, they have to strengthen their own military presence to try to prevent it.
We have had to listen to a lot. Threats, pressure, and condescending remarks, even from our closest allies for a generation. About
double tap the face of your phone, get the likes up.
As if it was something you could buy and own. That has no place anywhere. We shoulder our responsibility in the world, and it is not us who will seek out conflict. But let there be no doubt, no matter what happens, we will stand firm on what is right and what is wrong.
Do you want Stephen Miller to lose his job? Look, either Stephen Miller needs to get into a lane where he knows what he's talking about, or get out of his job. Look, the reason why I thought it was important for me to make a comment on the floor is I've been the Republican leader of the Senate NATO Observer Group since 2018. There is no more important alliance than the NATO alliance. And Denmark has punched above its weight. It came to Afghanistan, lost 43 soldiers on the ground, fought in some of the most contested regions, honoring their Article 5 commitment to the United States.
I think they lost more soldiers than any other country per capita.
Per capita, they did, and Jake, they were in among the NATO allies at the time. It was 30 nations. They were among the top 6.
Denmark recalls the foundational principle of international law that forbids states from threatening or using force against another state's territorial integrity and political independence. This imperative is enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. Members of the UN Security Council have a special responsibility to uphold these principles. The principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity must be respected. The inviolability of borders is not up for negotiation. These are universal, sacrosanct principles enshrined in international law. They apply everywhere.
And as I noted on a recent video, according to the Danish Defense Ministry, their decades-old military standing in Greenland remains firm. That standing being
I saw a lady talking about that. I think
soldiers are ordered
to me,
shoot first and ask
he's
questions
acting like
later.
Bibi Netanyahu, but I saw that other lady talking about it.
No clearance, no delay. Shoot first, ask questions later. This is what orders have given from Copenhagen lately after US President Donald Trump's renewed calls to take control of the strategic Arctic island. While Copenhagen has confirmed that a Cold War era military rule remains active, but refuses
Yeah,
to
I
rule
saw
out
her.
use of military force to guard territory. According to Danish newspaper Berlingske, the Defense Ministry confirmed that a 1952 rule of engagement requires soldiers to immediately counterattack invading forces without awaiting orders.
It's not just a rejection of Trump's ideas, right? That's a scathing indictment of how the United States is now perceived by our allies, that they are having to strengthen their own military defense and invoke post-World War II legislation because their once trusted ally is helmed
he wants them
by an
all
absolute
over.
egomaniac, hell-bent on doing
Listen,
anything and everything.
if y'all remember, it's a club. It is a club, that undercover guy that went to Colombia and busted that child brothel ring. It's like a pyramid. And their discussion was to build hotels all over the country where they had a child brothels. I keep mentioning that because with this rebuilding and building and taking over, that is what is going to happen. I don't know why they want this foreign country, and it's some here in the U.S., to be full of this ring. It's like it's a goal. And that's what they're trying to do with this taking over land and putting these, like his granddaddy had these brothels, and they're using minor kids and free labor with the undocumented immigrants. It's repeating. I don't know how to keep saying it. We heard a message maybe about 4 months ago. It was a couple of cabinet people, and they were talking about they had to implement slavery again. And they were talking, and he said, how are we going to do that? The black people are not going to go for it. And he said, no, we have to use the females and kids. And they were talking about mandating that girls had to be pregnant in high school, something that they were trying to implement. So they have a plan that they are trying to implement. And why it had been getting passed is that there are people in his cabinet that have invested in this brothel. I don't know if it's foreign country or U.S. country or, it's just crazy. Why would that be of interest to you? To invest in minors, because they are Zionists. Let me stop. This is how they get into hell. I guess it's totally opposite of God, and they are into converting. So let me not lose focus and look at this with a sound Christian mind, because they are totally opposite. I mean, I have to stop that. I'm constantly thinking. I mean, this is a devil's game, and his persistence is he's working hard for the devil. I'm just gonna put it like that. Yeah, and he's not obeying rules, guidelines, are nothing. And we know that his money is funny. And I don't think he is going to go to jail or allow himself to go through the ridicule again, because he know that the whole town is going to be laughing at him, and he is not going to be able to handle that. Yeah. And he know good and damn well it's finna come out. Yeah. Let me get to the final warning to Trump after threats. Yeah. And so everybody is about to get ready to fight the U.S. Why? Because Donald Trump made a deal with the devil. Yeah. And he's trying to make it his point to do the devil's dance, the devil's work. Let me get to, oh boy. And I mean, this is some of the craziest mess I have ever seen in my life. Oh, that guy. Let me see this. Dang it. I don't know where I want to start with the Epstein. I do know Mark Epstein, who is in the Epstein files. Once his brother, I'm trying to do more than one thing at one time, exhumed and an autopsy to prove if he was
When my
murdered
streaming bill hit $180 a month for channels I
or
don't even
if
watch,
he
I
unalived
didn't get mad.
himself.
I got friendly.
Let's
I
listen.
wanted to give everybody an update on the Epstein files. We've had so much with Venezuela and then the execution of an unarmed American citizen by ICE. But the Epstein files are still lurking, and there are deadlines being missed and new information that's coming up. And something that just, I've heard it before, but Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, says that he was murdered. And then in February, we're going to have a new autopsy report that shows that. So this came up, and this is a bombshell after all these years.
In February.
An unarmed American citizen by ICE. But the Epstein files are still lurking, and there are deadlines being missed and new information that's coming up. And something that just, I've heard it before, but Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, says that he was murdered. And then in February, we're going to have a new autopsy report that shows that. So this came up, and this is a bombshell after all these years. We find out from News Nation that Mark Epstein refers to a new autopsy report that will prove his brother was murdered. And then if you go into the body of the article, he has hired a former New York City chief medical examiner to conduct a new autopsy. Those results will be released in February. And I think this is a really important update because Mark Epstein has been saying this, and you've seen the doctored footage, and you've seen every single person that we've asked on this podcast and at large, do you think Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide? The answer is no. And Jennifer, just a quick reminder, who was president when Jeffrey Epstein was murdered and in charge of the Department of Justice? Well, that was Donald Trump and Bill Barr. So I think this is going to ignite again the conversation about, we want to see the videos of how Epstein died.
I mean, this is the whole ball game. I mean, I remember when he died, and I remember, like, I wasn't super into following all of the Epstein stuff, but I remember I was more following all of Trump's, fuckery and Trump 1.0. And I remember saying to my husband, don't you think probably that DOJ did it? Like, how could he commit suicide? Like, how could that happen in federal custody like that? And my husband's a criminal defense lawyer, goes to, federal prisons all the time. A high profile prisoner like that, this just would not happen. And then I am no pathologist, or even though I do watch a lot of true crime shows, armchair pathologist. When I saw the room, and I am a human being, and I thought about, okay, if I was trying to do that with what he had to work with, it seemed impossible. So let's just say he was murdered. then that means that the Trump administration and the Trump
Here we go
DOJ,
again.
somebody connected to it, murdered him. Right. I mean, that's just all it means. And it's the biggest bombshell of them all, that he was just quote unquote handled. And I just don't think it's possible that he just anatomically with that room, I just don't think it's possible that he committed suicide. I think they killed him. That's my opinion.
Well, and I remember when I heard that, I've heard of prisoners committing suicide. So that
Yeah, but I'll let Orange
said the video,
stop in his room.
Officers in charge of watching it were asleep and the video was out. I was like, there's no question. All of this stuff is not a coincidence. It just doesn't happen that way. And you look at who stands to gain from the death of Jeffrey Epstein?
Trump.
That's an obvious question. And then another thing I found interesting this week was Robert Garcia, who is the ranking member for the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. He comes out, and we've been talking about Mar-a-Lago's connection to the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking ring. Here's Robert Garcia.
And so there's a lot happening, and we're actually right now taking testimony and from survivors, some other people involved. So our work on the Epstein case is just starting and moving forward. And Donald Trump thinks it's over. He doesn't really understand the breadth of what we're doing here. There's so much information about Mar-a-Lago, what their role was in the trafficking of girls. There's so much happening.
Mar-a-Lago.
So all will come out. The truth will come out, and we're just working hard to make sure that people understand that we want justice for the survivors.
To see the ranking member of a House committee investigating this, what was the role of Mar-a-Lago in the sex trafficking ring? I found that to be somewhat shocking. I mean, that's very pointed in my opinion.
They say somebody died
of course,
there.
Pam Bondi's covering it up. Of course, she didn't meet the deadlines. Of course, she's violating the law. That's just what they do. What's your response to that?
I mean, I didn't think that was, because we reported right before all of the Venezuela stuff that they had released that Trump was sending girls from the Mar-a-Lago spa to Jeffrey Epstein's house. To me, all of this, there doesn't seem to be much new information on this, as much as it is confirming what everybody always thought about all of this. And I didn't think the Mar-a-Lago stuff was as pointed, but I don't follow this as close to you do, because it's like, duh, of course. Right. We know he got Virginia go free from Mar-a-Lago. We know that Donald Trump has ended this thing up to his eyeballs.
Yeah, he stole her, as Donald Trump's exact words.
Stole her.
And, I look at the people, the survivors, that they're seeing this, and I feel happy for them that they know that people are working towards releasing this information. And you have Thomas Massey, who is a Republican, who's been out front of all of this, and he is saying to Pam Bondi, we're going to hold you accountable at some point. And I cannot wait for the day that so many members of this administration, Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, obviously Donald Trump, I wish, but the Supreme Court, gave him a pass. They need to be in handcuffs because, in my opinion, they are committing nonstop crimes every day. But here's Thomas Massey giving a very solemn warning to Pam Bondi.
And like you said, there are next steps beyond that. There's contempt, which requires referral to the DOJ. Now, the problem with that is if you refer contempt of Congress to the DOJ,
yes, I heard
they're not
that.
going to prosecute it. They never do.
I heard about his mom and about
so there's also inherent contempt, which hasn't been practiced in over 80 years. We're drafting that.
Yep, I heard it.
And that's more desirable than impeachment because inherent contempt is resolved in one chamber of Congress, whereas impeachment would have to go also to the Senate. So those are the escalating degrees of things that we can do. But I also want to remind those folks at the DOJ, you can be prosecuted by a future DOJ for violating this law because it's a law. It's not a congressional subpoena that expires at the end of this Congress. It will last forever. This has got
just crimes, and more crimes. none of this, I wish they wouldn't start out politely, because this has been a cover up since that we've been aware of as a public since May of 2025, that they have been actively trying to cover this up. So I don't think they should get any graces. But one thing, and nobody might think this is great but me, Les Wexner, who Victoria's Secret, Jeffrey Epstein's first sponsor, so to speak,
Say
the
that
Oversight
again.
Committee is subpoenaing him.
Hold on, what? Oh, Wex.
Where as a public since May of 2025, that they have been actively trying to cover this up. So I don't think they should get any graces. But one thing, and nobody might think this is great but me, Les Wexner, who Victoria's Secret, Jeffrey Epstein's first sponsor, so to speak,
Handler.
the Oversight Committee is subpoenaing him to testify before Congress. And here's the thing. Here we have the reporting. In the House Oversight Committee just now, Ranking Member Robert Garcia just secured subpoenas for Les Wexner, billionaire businessman and longtime benefactor of Jeffrey Epstein, plus Darren Ideke and Richard Kahn, the executors of the Epstein estate. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to touch that just yet because I didn't want to touch about Yellow Bees'
On a
mom
personal note, I think
just right off the bat until it is confirmed how she expired or was unalived. But yes, I heard it, and I heard and I heard about the food allergy. But you know, that can take my mind in a whole bunch of different places. As far as I want to know where Pooh Shiesty, was he arrested in Texas, and why was he in Texas? Because it appears like that same, it goes back to it all being full circle to me. Why is he in Texas? In the federal, prison, halfway house. He got 4 more years. I know what they saying why, but how did he end in Texas? New Dallas. Yo Gotti. Didn't he just do something with Yo Gotti and Gorilla? Yeah. So because I know how I think, and I don't believe in all those coincidences, I need time to let that process as to where he was and why did he end up back in Texas. I know they was doing a video. I know they say Big 30 handed him a gun on video. Kind of same thing that happened to Boosie. But why was he in Texas? Yeah, as well as a mom who loses her son. Yeah, so, it's just ugly. It's just ugly, and that's why karma is real. And karma does not necessarily come back and hit you. And I'm not saying that what happened to her is karma. I'm saying realistically, if it was me, the first thing I would think is, oh my God, Lord, am I being punished? Is this because of the deeds, of my deeds? I mean, your karma does not necessarily come back and hit you. And, so it's tragic. Well, what if what's the little Chinese guy? He's telling them not to take no orders up from Greenland. It's illegal, and it is, it's not a legal order. So yeah, he has told them not to take it. I mean, this is crazy. So he said he took over, trying to take over Venezuela because Obama was a dictator. So what's the thing with Greenland? Oh, because if he don't take them, China. I mean, when was there a discussion with you, China, and Russia that somebody was going to take over it? What's wrong with Greenland? Why does somebody need to take over it? No one has ever taken over before. So have y'all been discussing the countries that y'all going to invade and take over? I mean, I'm sure it was a lie, hopefully, but why was that even a discussion? And what is the reason? If there's no reason. So you're in takeover to steal property, to steal land, to steal money. So you're invading these countries to steal. So they're saying, some people are saying Russia, but that's the same thing that's going on in Gaza. And that's why he was selling the West Bank. He had a deal with Bibi Netanyahu. Then he also turned around and made a deal with Qatar. I mean, so what? You finna start real estate business in all these foreign countries. Why? Because you can't get money. No bank is going to give you money in the U.S. and you don't pay your bills, and everybody now know that here. So you're going to go to foreign countries, take over, bogart, intimidate, steal, kill, destroy, and rebuild. Well, they are trying to refuse, and he's saying like he's going to bomb them and take it over. He bombed. To him, it was successful with Venezuela. So, hell, I'm going to do it again. Why? Because I'm greedy. And then I'll just claim it. I'm Christopher Columbus. Didn't he? He did something special with Christopher Columbus Day. And So in his mind, part of his little bitty brain, he think he Christopher Columbus. I'm gonna steal the land and claim it.
That Epstein and Les Wexner, I think Wexner loved Jeffrey Epstein, because I don't think anybody gives somebody a $77 million penthouse, brownstone in New York, without being stupid in love. And then he took millions and millions and millions of dollars from Les Wexner, and Les Wexner let it ride forever. So this is something that I find absolutely
that was his
fascinating.
handler.
These women were victimized because of the name of Victoria's Secret. Come model for us. I represent Victoria's Secret. If you looked online, if you
y'all get the lights up, please,
you would find there was a very strong connection between Les Wexner, who again is the CEO of Victoria's Secret, and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I think I've always wondered about how he got his money, because it's so sketchy. The story about it is so incredibly sketchy about his ascent. Now, it's either, like you said, it's love, or there's, compromise that Jeffrey Epstein had on Les Wexner, and he was blackmailing him and bribing him. Something really, really nefarious. It's one of those two things. And so I think it's very interesting. I also thought of note of the, to go back to the Massey comment about, I was happy and pleased to see that there is a Republican, even though I don't like MAGA, you guys, that somebody is standing up to Pam Bondi and standing up to the DOJ, because it is so important. And all of these fiscal conservatives, the country club Republicans that voted for Donald Trump, that know better, but they did because they're greedy and they didn't want to pay as much in taxes. When you erode the justice system and you erode the court system, you erode the economy. And this is incredibly important. And it's amazing to me how all of these things are kind of Venn diagramming, are kind of like intersecting. And at the epicenter of this entire story. So thank you so much for curating this episode, Pumps, because this Epstein stuff, I think the cover-up started the day in January when the Trump administration invited all of the MAGA influencers and gave them the binders. They gave them the exact information that had already been out. Remember, and like it's that girl
They had
that
all the
stupid
pictures. Yeah.
TikTok, and they invite all these fucking flea bag morons, and they thought, oh, because it shows you how stupid they think their base is by the way they've treated Epstein stuff. It's really the treatment of the Epstein stuff is not only protection of elites, but also the condescending nature that they have towards the people who vote for them.
No, I completely agree. So we will keep you updated. We're following this very closely. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel.
They didn't call them taco tits. What happened to the taco tits? Hold on. Please double tap the face of the screen. Get the likes up, please. Double tap the face of your phone if you're listening in on your phone. Get the likes up. I hit the 3 dots at the top. So earlier today, I had came across, I had one of the Clinton's discussions, and he was talking about Epstein, and I said, oh, hold up. I'll wait for that until now. Hold on. Because there's been another bombshell. This one, and then there's something else.
I want to begin by saying this plainly. I did not expect to be speaking under circumstances like these. Former presidents are supposed to fade into history, to offer counsel when asked.
They've been using his voice
steadiness.
Here.
But there are times when restraint stops being responsible.
A lot.
There are moments when silence sends the wrong signal. In 2026, we are living through one of those moments. Donald Trump is the sitting president of the United States. He was inaugurated on January 20th, 2025, after winning the 2024 election. And with that office comes an obligation to uphold not only the law, but the moral authority of the presidency itself. What we are now witnessing is a direct challenge to that authority, triggered by new revelations connected to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal that have prompted members of Congress to demand immediate impeachment proceedings. Let me be clear about what this is and what it is not. This is not gossip. It is not partisan rumor. It is not internet speculation masquerading as outrage. It is a constitutional response to information serious enough, credible enough, and troubling enough that elected representatives believe the integrity of the presidency itself may be compromised. When Congress speaks in the language of impeachment, it is not supposed to do so lightly. Impeachment is not a political weapon. It is a safeguard. It exists for moments when the nation must stop and ask whether a president can continue to govern with the trust of the people. The fact that members of Congress are now calling for immediate action tells you how severe this moment is. The Epstein case has always represented something deeply corrosive in American life, the idea that wealth, power, and influence can insulate people from scrutiny while victims are silenced. It is a symbol of elite impunity, of shadows where accountability should have been. Any new information connected to that network, especially when it touches a sitting president, cannot be dismissed or delayed. The cost of ignoring it is far greater than the discomfort of confronting it. What has changed now is not public curiosity, but congressional urgency. New disclosures have raised questions serious enough that lawmakers believe waiting is no longer acceptable. They are not alleging conclusions, they are demanding answers. And when the president responds to such moments with outrage instead of transparency, suspicion deepens rather than fades. I've spent a lifetime in public service. I understand how allegations can be weaponized. I understand how political enemies can exploit ambiguity. But I also understand this. The presidency does not belong to the man who occupies it. It belongs to the American people. And when credible questions arise that strike at moral fitness, the office must come before the individual. This is not about relitigating the past for sport. It is about protecting the present. The Epstein scandal is not just another headline, it is a stain that represents systemic failure. Any proximity to it, any unanswered questions surrounding it, become exponentially more dangerous when attached to presidential power. That is why Congress is acting, not because of hysteria, but because delay erodes trust, because silence breeds conspiracy, because pretending nothing has changed would signal that there are two standards of accountability in America, one for ordinary citizens and another for the powerful. Donald Trump has long presented himself as a victim of institutions,
Bill
as someone
Clinton working with
perpetually
them
persecuted by
about what
systems
he
he claims are
knows about
corrupt.
them Epstein
But the
files.
presidency demands the opposite posture. It requires openness. It requires restraint. It requires a willingness to submit to scrutiny without turning the nation against itself. When a president responds to grave institutional concern by attacking Congress, the media, and the idea of oversight itself, it raises the very alarm impeachment was designed to address. A president is not weakened by accountability. A presidency is weakened when accountability is treated as betrayal. This moment should sober every American, regardless of party. The question before us is not whether you support Donald Trump politically. The question is whether the presidency can function when trust is this fragile and questions this serious remain unanswered. As Democrats, we believe in institutions because they protect people from unchecked power. We believe in oversight because history teaches us what happens without it. And we believe that no office, not even the highest one, should be insulated from inquiry when moral credibility is at stake. Congress is not demanding impeachment because it wants chaos. It is demanding it because the alternative, pretending this moment doesn't matter, would be far more dangerous. This is not a spectacle. It is a reckoning. And how the nation responds will shape far more than one presidency. It will determine whether accountability still means something in the United States of America. When I first learned of the new disclosures linked to Jeffrey Epstein, I recognized immediately that we were entering a different kind of political and moral moment. Epstein's legacy is already a dark chapter in American history. His network, his influence, and the shadows he cast on those who associated with him left wounds that are still being measured. But now, with the sitting president connected, even indirectly, to these revelations, the stakes are higher than ever. This is no longer just a story about scandal or secrecy. It is a story about the credibility of the office that represents the nation itself. I want to be very clear about what the bombshell represents. This is not speculation. It is not rumor passed along by cable networks or social media threads. These are credible disclosures documents, sworn statements, corroborated accounts that raise legitimate questions about judgment, proximity, and association. They suggest patterns and behaviors that demand accountability. For members of Congress to call for immediate impeachment is not a partisan reflex. It is a constitutional obligation. One of the most troubling aspects of these revelations is the context. Epstein's history involved exploitation, manipulation, and the protection of those who had wealth and influence. Those who surrounded him willingly or otherwise, were part of a network that allowed predation to flourish.
There you go, Barbara. He just said it. Did you hear him?
Even tangentially in such a
He told you what it's about right there.
For the public to ignore the implications.
Sit back and listen.
Legitimate questions about judgment, proximity, and association. They suggest patterns and behaviors that demand accountability. For members of Congress to call for immediate impeachment is not a partisan reflex. It is a constitutional obligation. One of the most troubling aspects of these revelations is the context. Epstein's history involved exploitation, manipulation, and the protection of those who had wealth and influence. Those who surrounded him, willingly or otherwise, were part of a network that allowed predation to flourish unchecked. When a sitting president is implicated even tangentially in such a network, it is impossible for the public to ignore the implications. Leadership is not just about power, it is about moral fitness. And moral fitness is judged not only by what you do, but by whom you surround yourself with, whose activities you tolerate, and whose wrongdoing you fail to acknowledge or prevent. We cannot treat this as a private matter or as a relic of the past. The presidency is the highest office in the land, and it carries with it obligations that go far beyond policy decisions or political strategy. It demands judgment, prudence, and the ability to stand above associations that compromise integrity. When questions arise suggesting that a president has, at the very least, been in proximity to wrongdoing, the American people have a right to answers. More than that, the Constitution provides mechanisms, impeachment being one of them, to respond when credibility is in doubt. I know some will argue that proximity does not equal complicity, that questions alone do not justify impeachment. They are correct in a narrow legal sense. But the presidency is not just about legality, it is about trust. Trust cannot survive in an environment where serious questions about judgment and associations are ignored or dismissed. Every day a president remains in office without addressing these concerns deepens the erosion of confidence, not just in him, but in the office he holds. The Epstein bombshell also reminds us why transparency is critical. Secrets and silence.
I asked, I'm not sure if you saw, I asked for y'all to double tap the screen or hit the like button, get the likes up. There's 348 people in at this time. I need for you to double tap the face of your phone if that's the device you're listening in on. If not, if you're on your computer, there are 3 dots at the top corner, right corner. If you can hit the like button, I would greatly appreciate it. I will continue after the like button is hit. I will take a water break so that y'all can get the likes up. There's a lot going on. Double tap, double tap, double tap. Bye. Oh, you said good day. I thought you said goodbye. Hi, Dougie. Hi, Doug Fresh. You know I was finna call you Dougie. How you doing? Let's go.
Allowed Epstein's abuses to persist for years. The same principle applies to a presidency. Concealment or deflection in the face of serious allegations creates an appearance of impropriety. And appearances matter when it comes to public trust. Americans deserve to know that their leader is not compromised, not because they want to punish, but because they need assurance that the highest office is beyond reproach.
That's my second name.
We must also remember the victims in this context. Their courage in coming forward has revealed a system that protected the powerful and silenced the vulnerable. Any failure by those in positions of authority to confront or answer these revelations is, in effect, a failure to uphold the very principles of justice the presidency is meant to embody. It is a reminder that moral responsibility cannot be delegated, it must be exercised, especially at the highest level. This is why the bombshell matters is more than a scandal. It is a test of institutional integrity, a moment in which Congress, the public, and the office of the presidency itself are being asked to respond to evidence of potential moral compromise. The questions raised are not hypothetical, they are immediate and urgent. How a sitting president responds or fails to respond has ramifications for governance,
Fails to
for national
respond.
trust, and for the standard of accountability in American life. In the end, this is not about personal animus. It is not about political advantage. It is about whether the presidency continues to represent the ideals of integrity, judgment,
No,
and
they
moral
trying. They
authority
gonna have to peel
that
his
the
ass
American
from that
people
chair.
expect.
He gonna have
Any
some
president,
attached to
regardless of
him.
party, who
You
fails
know,
that
he gonna
test
go out in the
risks not
bang.
only their own position, but the faith of the nation in the office itself. When Congress moves toward impeachment, it is not a decision made lightly. It is not a spectacle for television or a political stunt. It is a constitutional responsibility designed to preserve the integrity of the office when the occupant's conduct raises serious questions about the ability to govern responsibly. In 2026, the demands for immediate impeachment of President Trump are a reflection of both urgency and principle. The disclosures connected to Jeffrey Epstein are too serious to ignore.
Say that again.
It is not a spectacle for television or a political stunt. It is a constitutional responsibility designed to preserve the integrity of the office when the occupant's conduct raises serious questions about the ability to govern responsibly. In 2026, the demands for immediate impeachment of President Trump are a reflection of both urgency and principle. The disclosures connected to Jeffrey Epstein are too serious to ignore. The questions about judgment, proximity, and moral fitness are too weighty to delay. Members of Congress, both seasoned legislators and committee leaders say, reviewed the evidence and have concluded that the presidency cannot continue unexamined under these circumstances. They are not issuing accusations lightly. They are invoking the mechanisms that the Constitution provides for extraordinary moments. Impeachment is not intended as punishment. It is a safeguard, a check on the concentration of power when credibility and public trust are in doubt. What has prompted this unprecedented demand is a unique combination of factors surrounding Epstein and President Trump. These are not allegations from decades ago that have been resolved. These are active, verifiable disclosures that raise urgent questions about judgment and accountability. They strike at the core of what the presidency represents. The expectation that a leader can act in the public interest, uphold the law, and maintain moral authority. Congressional leaders are acting not to settle partisan scores, but to defend the integrity of the office. That distinction is crucial. A sitting president is powerful, but power is not immunity. Oversight, investigation, and the constitutional process of impeachment exists precisely because no one, not even the president, should be beyond accountability. When questions of ethical compromise arise, the legislature is obligated to respond. This is why the calls are for immediate action. Delay in these circumstances is not neutral, it is complicity. The longer serious questions remain unaddressed, the more trust erodes not just in the president,
And
but
the
in the
more
office itself.
harm he does.
Sitting president is powerful, but power is not immunity. Oversight, investigation, authority. Congressional leaders are acting not to settle partisan scores, but to defend the integrity of the office. That distinction is crucial. A sitting president is powerful, but power is not immunity. Oversight, investigation, and the constitutional process of impeachment exists precisely because no one, not even the president, should be beyond accountability. When questions of ethical compromise arise, the legislature is obligated to respond. This is why the calls are for immediate action. Delay in these circumstances is not neutral, it is complicity. The longer serious questions remain unaddressed, the more trust erodes not just in the president, but in the office itself. The American people must have confidence that when credible concerns arise, institutions respond with consistency and seriousness without fear or favor. In reviewing this evidence, Congress is also acknowledging a fundamental truth: moral fitness matters. Policy positions, speeches, and political theater cannot substitute for judgment and integrity. A president who cannot withstand scrutiny or who is perceived as compromised by association with egregious wrongdoing jeopardizes not only domestic governance but the nation's standing in the world. This is why impeachment is being demanded and why Congress is taking the steps so urgently. By now, we have seen the familiar pattern. When confronted with serious questions, President Trump does not respond with clarity or accountability. He responds with deflection. He responds with attacks. He frames the questions themselves as persecution, and he insists, with the force of rhetoric, that any scrutiny of his conduct is partisan or illegitimate. This reaction is predictable, but no less troubling.
Absolutely.
Leadership is
Predictable.
revealed not by the ability to command attention or dominate media cycles, but by the willingness to confront reality, even when it is uncomfortable. Accountability is not weakness, it is strength. A president who cannot distinguish between criticism and conspiracy, between inquiry and attack, undermines the very institution he was elected to lead. Trump's approach in this situation, as in so many others, follows a consistent formula. First, deny. Deny that there is any relevance to the allegations. Deny that the associations matter. Deny that evidence exists. Second, attack the messenger. Judges, investigators, journalists, and members of
Fake
Congress are all
news.
portrayed as adversaries. Third, claim victimhood. He positions himself as the target of an unfair system, as someone being persecuted for success, for power, or for simply existing outside conventional norms. This pattern is not new, and it is not incidental. It is a strategy designed to distract, to confuse, and to consolidate loyalty. Those who support him are encouraged to see scrutiny as betrayal.
I agree, Lewis.
Those who oppose him are dismissed as enemies. And the truth, the inconvenient facts that demand examination, becomes irrelevant in the public discourse. But the problem extends beyond Trump himself. We have seen repeated instances of Republican complicity. Congressional leaders, party strategists, and influential voices have time and again chosen silence or minimization over principle. They excuse deflection, they rationalize evasion. They attack the very mechanisms designed to...
Please get the likes up. Get the likes up. Next time I leave, I'm not coming back.
to hold the president accountable. In doing so, they sacrifice the integrity of the institutions they swore to uphold. This is not merely...
Hold on. So only one person hit the like button. Okay. Cool.
And influential voices have time and again chosen silence or minimization over principle. They excuse deflection, they rationalize evasion. They attack the very mechanisms designed to hold the president accountable. In doing so, they sacrifice the integrity of the institution. Moral education. Loyalty should never replace accountability. Protecting power at the expense of principles erodes democracy from within. Every moment spent rationalizing, every statement minimizing serious concerns, every effort to shield this conduct from scrutiny weakens the public trust that is essential for governance. I understand party loyalty. I understand the pressures of politics. But we are talking about the presidency here. The consequences of abandoning standards at this level are profound. When leaders of the Republican Party prioritize personal or political allegiance over the rule of law, they signal to the country that there are two systems, one for the powerful and one for everyone else. That is not leadership. That is a breach of public trust. The American people must see this clearly. The president's reaction to credible questions and the party's willingness to defend him unconditionally are not abstract problems. They have real consequences. They affect how citizens perceive government, how institutions are respected, and how accountability is enforced. When these norms are ignored, the very foundation of democracy is threatened. This is why the calls for impeachment are justified. It is not revenge. It is not partisan opportunism. It is a response to a combination of behavior, evasion, and systemic enablement that cannot be overlooked. The president's own actions, denial, deflection, attacks on institutions combined with the party's complicity create a scenario in which the mechanisms designed to preserve trust must be employed. We are witnessing a test of character, not just for Donald Trump, but for the party.
Well, that word character again.
And we are witnessing a test for the nation itself. Do we uphold principles and accountability even when it is inconvenient or politically costly?
Yep,
or do we allow power to insulate wrongdoing and normalize evasion?
So if you crash at 2 p.m. every day, Dose for Your Liver can help. So my days are nonstop with filming.
The stakes could not be higher. The decisions made now will reverberate through history. They will define how the presidency is understood, how party loyalty is judged, and how Americans perceive the value of truth in public life. And make no mistake, these are not hypothetical risks. They are
high-profile names, big people in public life. Again, though, it is incredibly challenging to try to report on some of these images and documents because there is so much context that is missing. But again, here we have what appear to be never-before-seen photos of Jeffrey Epstein in both of Bill Clinton, in Jeffrey Epstein's presence and Ghislaine Maxwell's presence. Again, we don't know the context around these photos when they were even taken.
All right, MJ, thanks so much. Please flag us down when you have more. Let's bring back Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald. Julie, what's your take on these Clinton photos that have been released?
It's just hard to know. We don't know when they were taken or where they were taken, under what circumstances. But of course, the more that we see photos of him, the more questions with Epstein and in Epstein's houses, or we don't know where they are. And I think it just raises more questions about how close he was with Epstein, and the fact that at some point he had to have known what Epstein's crimes were. I mean, he had been accused for a long time, and it was known he was accused of molesting underage girls. So I think that these raise more questions that I think he probably will be asked about these photos.
K. Brown, thank you so much.
That I'm sure he is working with them right now
more on this developing story. The Epstein files have been released. What's in them? What can we learn? Stay tuned.
Yeah, I don't think these.
The Trump Justice Department has 1 week from tonight to comply with the law passed by Congress, compelling it to release all the files that it has related to the late sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. But ahead of that deadline for the administration,
Congress is providing new insight this evening into just how expansive his orbit of rich and powerful friends actually was. None of the men that you're about to see are accused of wrongdoing. That's important to note. But Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have released these pictures from Jeffrey Epstein's estate.
Those were
You're
not
going to
new.
feel your life change forever. Just kidding. 1 gummy, you're going to feel chill and mellow. 2 gummies, you'll feel...
Fight Club, we stay focused on the important issues, and that is the Epstein files. And you know, Norm, I know you and I talk about this all the time offline, but I think it's worthwhile sharing with our viewers.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Katie and Norm's Legal Fight Club. I'm Norm Eisen. I'm here with my friend Katie Fang to describe the latest fight. Katie, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's a distraction from the thing that Donald Trump is the most afraid of. Tell us about it.
I mean, military strikes in Venezuela, threats to criminally investigate Fed Chair Jerome Powell, horrific stuff happening across our country. Why? Because Trump and the GOP does not want you to be focusing on the Epstein files. But, you know, listen, fortunately, Norm, we at the Contrarian Democracy Defenders here at Legal Fight Club, we stay focused on the important issues, and that is the Epstein files. And, you know, Norm, I know you and I talk about this all the time offline, but I think it's worthwhile sharing with our viewers right now. You and I can read the plain language of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And on its face, it said 30 days, which came and went on December 19th to turn over.
Never leave home without it.
Oh, look at this. Great minds think alike. It's not even that long, Norman. I always tell people, go and read it yourself. 30 days, there's only certain withholdings that are allowed for withholdings and redactions. The deadline's been blown through. The redactions and withholdings have been blown through. The required congressional disclosures as to what and why things were being withheld or redacted, that's been blown through. Pam Bondi sending a letter to a federal judge last week saying, dog ate my homework. We're so concerned about the victims that we are taking as long as we can, which you would think would make sense, but got so bad that Massey and Khanna had to send and ask for a special master now to that same judge because nobody believes the DOJ. I mean, Norm, everybody wants to know, is any of this legal, and why are there no recourses at this point?
So let's go through those one by one, friends, and then we're going to explain to you what the legal resource is. But here at Norm and Katie's Legal Fight Club, we're not only covering this fight, they're like, don't look in the ring at the Epstein files fight. Look at the Jerome Powell situation. Look at the attacks on Venezuela. Oh, we're going to go to Greenland. The chaos that's being wrought in our cities. No. We're not falling for that. Katie, let's start with the fact that there was a legal requirement to have 2 things by this point. All of the Epstein files were supposed to be produced except where victim identities or other issues were going to be exposed. There was supposed to be redactions, and those redactions and withheld documents were supposed to be in the Federal Register.
Yep.
Neither of those things has happened. So that is a flat-out violation of the law, friends. The law has been broken. Now, Katie, let's go through what everybody is doing about that.
Sure.
Let's start with Senator Schumer. He has called for a bill to be moved through Congress. And if you're in favor of justice and accountability and of getting these Epstein files out, Senator Schumer is right. The Senate and the Congress should vote on a bill to allow litigation. Katie, others are also moving. What about in the House of Representatives, that bipartisan duo of Ro Khanna and of Massey? What are they doing to complement Senator Schumer?
They filed what is a letter that can be construed as a motion in the Southern District of New York before the federal judge that has been presiding over Ghislaine Maxwell's case. And they have asked for the appointment of something called a special master. There's a rule of federal procedure, Norm, that you and I have dealt with before. Special masters can be appointed within the discretion of a judge to help in cases that are particularly complex, maybe have some nuanced legal issues that need to be noodled a little bit more, developed a little bit more, and the presiding judge just doesn't have the capacity to do it right now. Or in cases where there's voluminous records and documents. Sounds like the Epstein files, right? And a special master, if appointed by the judge, would basically serve as the judge with all of kind of the rights and abilities and powers to even order people to show up to make explanations and to produce things so that we can get to the bottom of the truth. There's a lot of excuses being peddled by the DOJ and pushed out, and Kana and Massey say enough is enough. We are the people that are the key architects of this Epstein Files Transparency Act, and we know that the DOJ is just stonewalling, and we want to have some accountability.
Now, also on the plus side, while we're on the House of Representatives, the work that has been done by ranking member Robert Garcia has made him a very familiar face together with Kana and Massey in the House of Representatives fighting for these victims. He and the House Oversight Committee are bringing in witnesses. So, again, friends, we promise to cut through the distractions and share what's really going on. Perhaps the most important witness, billionaire Les Wexner, the longtime friend and client
and lover
of Epstein,
allegedly,
who has accounted for a great deal of Epstein's financial support. Let's hear what Congressman Garcia had to say about his work to get this and other critical witnesses in front of the committee.
There are whistleblowers within the Department of Justice. There is a bubble that continues to grow of people within our agencies that are frustrated and tired of all of this being hidden and not coming out. And so there's going to be a lot of people. I believe if the files aren't released and everything's not put on the table, you are going to have, I believe, people within the DOJ begin to call that out. And I think that Pam Bondi knows this, which is why they are working overtime and trying to cover their tracks right now.
Enhance your membership with the American Express Platinum Card and access over $3,500 in annual value.
So, Congressman Garcia is continuing to keep the pressure on in order to encourage those whistleblowers to come forward. But what about Pamela Joe, as you call her? You're both of us know her, right? I know her from the impeachment. She was so friendly. She was so lacking as an impeachment defense lawyer.
I forgot about that, Norm. I forgot she was on that impeachment team.
Yeah, she was so friendly. She's not that friendly now. And you know her from Florida legal circles.
Yep.
Tell us a little more about what's going on with her and that dog ate my homework letter.
Well, they're trying to haul her before Congress to have to answer questions as to what the hell is going on because everything is happening on her watch. Listen, we all know Norm and all of our viewers know she's just a law lackey for Donald Trump. She's just doing everything and moving at the pace and tempo of a snail to satisfy what Trump wants. But she's the Attorney General of the United States. She's not the personal lawyer for Donald Trump. So she owes a higher duty obligation and oath to the office that serves us as the American people. But more importantly, Norm, she's a lawyer. And you and I both know we can't knowingly, intentionally violate the law. Kana and Massey have included in their request for a special master to the federal judge a direct call out saying that criminal activity has been committed by the DOJ. And if there's anybody who the buck stops with, it's got to be with Pamela Joe. So Congress is trying to get her before committees to be able to answer questions as to what in the actual heck is happening here, because we're not dumb. We are not dumb. We can believe our own eyes, Norm, and we can see the total conspiracy that's happening. But Norm, I got to ask you,
A lot of us can sit and complain about what's happening, and we're grateful for the acts that we're seeing from members of Congress and others. But there are those of us that are in the fray with the help of our subscribers from the Contrarian, and there are those of us at Democracy Defenders that are actually putting the work behind our words.
That's right, friends.
Okay, so before I go, I got one more I'm going to play briefly. It's about, and it is about the lawsuit Minnesota have brought against Trump administration. I mean, he keeps getting tagged, but I'm ready for them to yank him out. It's time to yank him out before he elects to push a button. Yeah. Hell on us for being mad that we
have breaking news right now. City and state leaders in Minnesota are making an announcement about the surge in federal immigration agents. Take a listen.
Of Mayor Herr, who is also a dear friend of many years. We've come together and we're here to announce a lawsuit we're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota. Because this has to stop.
It has to stop.
It just has to stop. We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. We allege that the surge, reckless impact on our schools, on our local law enforcement is a violation of the 10th Amendment and the sovereign laws and powers of the Constitution grants to states. We've come to
We have breaking news right now. City and state leaders in Minnesota are making an announcement about the surge in federal immigration agents. Take a listen.
Of Mayor Herr, who is also a dear friend of many years. We've come together and we're here to announce a lawsuit we're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota. Because this has to stop. It just has to stop. We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. We allege that the surge, reckless impact on our schools, on our local law enforcement is a violation of the 10th
They're
Amendment.
going through people's
and
houses
the sovereign laws
now.
and powers of the Constitution grants to states. We allege that DHS's use of excessive and lethal force, their warrantless, racist arrests, their targeting of our courts, our churches, houses of worship, and schools are a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act on arbitrary and capricious federal actions. And we ask that the courts will end the surge of thousands of DHS agents into Minnesota. We ask the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence. We ask the courts to end the tactics on our places of worship, our schools, our courts, our marketplaces, our hospitals, and even funeral homes. The deployment of thousands of armed, mass DHS agents to Minnesota has done our state serious harm. This is, in essence, a federal invasion of the Twin Cities and Minnesota, and it must stop. DHS agents have sown chaos and terror across the metropolitan area and in cities across the state of Minnesota. Schools have gone onto lockdown. Entire districts have had to cancel school for tens of thousands of students to ensure safety and offer online education because of the students' and the parents' fear of coming into the school. Local businesses are struggling. Revenues are down. And some retail stores, daycares, and restaurants have actually closed because people are afraid to go out and to do their shopping, whether they're immigrants or whether they are citizens of many generations. This surge has made us less safe.
Thousands of poorly trained, aggressive, and armed agents of the state, of the federal government, have rolled into our communities, overwhelmed our local police departments, and law enforcement agencies should be focused on our public safety, but instead, many are dealing with the aftermath of DHS agents' chaos and violence. I want to thank our law enforcement officers for doing a tremendous job under very difficult circumstances. Not the people, but the federal government. Minneapolis police have had to respond to more than 20 ICE-related incidents, like witnesses seeking people being pulled into unmarked vehicles by men en masse, or ICE abandoning vehicles on the street with people detained inside. This is an unlawful commandeering of police resources. In just 2 days, responding to the chaos ICE has cost the city $2 billion in law enforcement and overtime expenses. 2 days. And I wish I could stop there, but I can't, because these poorly trained, aggressive, and armed agents of the federal state have terrorized Minnesota with widespread responding to the chaos ICE has cost the city $2 billion in law enforcement and overtime expenses.
Wow.
2 days. And I wish I could stop there, but I can't, because these poorly trained, aggressive, and armed agents of the federal state have terrorized Minnesota with widespread unlawful conduct. They're making unconstitutional arrests and using excessive force. DHS agents have barged into restaurants asking to access secure areas, and when asked to present a warrant, which is required by law, they respond, "We don't need one." DHS agents have arrested peaceful bystanders. They have fired chemical irritants at people obeying lawful orders while exercising their First Amendment rights. They have even done so at some of our most sensitive places, like Roosevelt High School here in Minneapolis. They have detained law-abiding citizens, leaving them handcuffed for hours, just because of the color of their skin, or what they're wearing, or they speak English with an accent. And on January 7th, 2026, a DHS agent shot and killed Renee Nicole Good, leaving her children without a mother and her 6-year-old son without either parent. This has to stop. So let's be clear. It never should have started. These agents have no good reason to be here. Minnesota's non-citizen immigrant population is just 1.5%, which is half the national average. Our state's percentage is lower than Utah, Texas, and Florida's, but none of those states have thousands of federal agents swarming their streets or harming their people. The administration says that they're focused on finding criminals. Worst of the worst, they say. But many of the people the DHS is arresting in Minnesota have no criminal history. That fits a pattern. In 2025, 93% of the people arrested by ICE had no violent criminal history, 65% had no criminal convictions at all, and randomly stopping people in the street because their skin color isn't the one that they expect or want isn't doing a thing to help public safety. I've heard the administration talk about fraud. No, not the 43 fraud convictions the president has, or the $43 million fraudsters the president has pardoned.
What did he
but
say?
Instead saying that ICE is here to look for fraud somehow. Fraud. No, not the 43 fraud convictions the president had.
I thought that's what he said.
Public safety. I've heard the administration talk about fraud. No, not the 43 fraud convictions the president has, or the $43 million fraudsters the president
Shots
has
fired.
pardoned. But instead saying that ICE is here to look for fraud somehow. You know, we work with federal government all the time, and if the federal government wants to help us with forensic accountants, we're open to that conversation. But these ICE agents who are engaged in the behavior that they're engaged in are not helping public safety at all. Immigration enforcement agents aren't trained to investigate fraud, and randomly stopping people on the street because you don't like their accent isn't going to stop fraud. So enforcing federal immigration law and fighting fraud are just pretexts for this surge. The real reason, it's no secret. Donald Trump and his administration have been targeting people, cities, and states that don't agree with them politically.
Right.
He singled out Minnesota countless times. He's called us corrupt and crooked. He's attacked our funding to the tune of billions of dollars, which we are challenging. And we fought back, of course. He's attacked programs that Minnesotans rely on and tried to shut them down and pay taxes for. And he's attacked Minnesotans with despicable, racist, xenophobic language. The truth is, Donald Trump doesn't seem to like our state very much. But
He don't like himself.
He doesn't like our best in the nation, safe and secure elections. And sometimes he doesn't like who we choose in them. Just last week, Trump claimed that he won Minnesota 3 times.
Lies.
When in fact, he's never won Minnesota. He doesn't like how we take care of each other or how we make sure our kids have enough to eat. He doesn't like the strength that immigrant communities bring to our state. And he doesn't seem to like that we protect our neighbors no matter where they were born. In short, the Trump administration's decision to target Minnesota and Twin Cities is motivated by a desire to retaliate against Trump's perceived political opponents, who are the people of the state of Minnesota and Twin Cities, rather than any good faith concerns about immigration enforcement, public safety, or law enforcement. In conclusion, I didn't have the pleasure and the benefit of knowing Renee Nicole Good, but her friends and family knew her as someone who was kind, someone who loved her family deeply, and someone willing to stand up for her neighbors. That sounds like the Minnesota that I know. The administration wants to paint false political narratives about us, but we know who we are and we know our rights. The Constitution gives Minnesota the sovereign authority to protect health and well-being of every single person who lives on our borders. The Constitution gives us the right to vote for who we want, pray however we want, and be whoever we want, without fear of being racially profiled, assaulted, or killed in our own communities. We're going to defend those rights because as much as they'd like to believe it, DHS is not above the law.
That's right.
And the people of Minnesota are certainly not beneath it.
I am currently on day 3, the last
Okay,
day
yeah, I
of
think
my
I'm finna go.
juice cleanse that I got from
I gotta
Juice
be
from the
back
Raw.
for
Let's talk
our
about
girl. Yeah, that's it. Oh, what time is it? 8. Yeah, 9:30. Yep, I'm finna go. I'll be back around 9:30. Peace.